never thought I would end up here, haunted by the choices I made, by the things I allowed to happen. It started as a simple favor, an act of loyalty, or at least that's how I justified it. My boss, a man with a silver tongue and an iron grip, asked me to fix some numbers in a report. It wasn't outright fraud, not at first, just slight adjustments to make the quarterly earnings look better. Everyone does it, he said. It's just business. I hesitated, but the fear of losing my job, of disappointing the people who depended on me, kept my hands from resisting. The first time was the hardest. My fingers trembled over the keyboard as I changed the figures. But when nothing happened, when the world kept spinning and I still had my job, I convinced myself it wasn't a big deal. I ignored the pit in my stomach, the way my reflection seemed unfamiliar in the office window. I didn't know then that I had just stepped onto a path that would lead me into a darkness I couldn't escape. I had convinced myself that if I didn't directly commit the wrongdoing, I wasn't responsible. But that lie unraveled quickly. My company secured a massive contract by falsifying reports, and I knew about it. I sat in meetings where they discussed tweaking numbers to make everything look perfect. At first, I told myself it was none of my business. But when they asked me to compile those numbers myself, my hands started shaking. I should have said no, but the pressure was unbearable. I needed this job, and refusing would mean being blacklisted from the industry. I did what they asked. I adjusted data, reworded statements, and made sure everything looked clean. The guilt was suffocating, but I still convinced myself that I wasn't directly hurting anyone. That changed when I overheard a conversation about how this false data would be used to push an unsafe product into the market. Real people could get hurt because of my silence. But even then, I just sat there, too afraid to speak up. I thought I could ignore my conscience, but the consequences of my silence became too real. A journalist started sniffing around, asking uncomfortable questions. One evening, I saw my boss walk into my office with a forced smile. He placed a folder in front of me. It was filled with everything I had done. He didn't say it outright, but I knew the message. If the truth came out, I would go down with them. They had made sure I was just as guilty as them. That night, I kept checking my phone, expecting a call that the scandal had broken. Every knock at my door made my heart race, but I still did nothing. Fear had rooted itself too deep in me, and so I continued playing along, sending carefully crafted emails, ensuring our deception stayed intact. But I knew it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. I thought I could manage my guilt by convincing myself it wasn't my fault. But then I saw a news report. An elderly couple had lost their life savings investing in our fraudulent project. The reporter read the story with a detached professionalism, but I felt like she was talking directly to me. I had played a role in this, and now real people were suffering. I wanted to believe there was a way out, but every choice seemed to lead deeper into this mess. I tried to talk to a coworker, someone I thought might share my guilt, but she shut me down immediately. "We all made our choices," she said coldly, "so live with yours." That sentence rang in my head for days. The walls of my own deception were closing in, and there was no one I could turn to. I started avoiding the news. Every headline felt like a personal attack. I knew that at any moment, an exposé could drop, dragging my name through the mud. I kept telling myself that staying quiet was the smart choice. But then, an email landed in my inbox, an internal memo warning employees to prepare for potential legal inquiries. My stomach turned. They were expecting a collapse, and they weren't going to protect me when it happened. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at my resignation letter. If I left now, I might escape the worst of it. But leaving meant admitting my guilt, and I wasn't ready for that. The thought of walking into that office one more time made my skin crawl. But I couldn't bring myself to let go of my paycheck, my security. So I deleted the letter and showed up to work the next morning, as if nothing was wrong. I thought I was being careful, but paranoia was eating me alive. Every glance from a coworker felt suspicious. Every unexpected meeting felt like an ambush. And then it happened, an anonymous tip to the press. The investigation had begun. The company tried to downplay it, but I could see the panic in everyone's eyes. We all knew this was only the beginning. That evening, my boss pulled me aside and handed me a new set of documents. "We need you to backdate some reports," he said casually, as if asking me to order lunch. My throat went dry. If I did this, I was all in. There would be no coming back from it, but if I refused, they would see me as a liability. I hesitated for too long. "You're not thinking of doing something stupid, are you?" he asked, his tone suddenly icy. I forced a smile and nodded, though my hands were shaking. I had never felt so trapped. That night I sat at my kitchen table, a pen in one hand and the falsified documents in the other. It was all there, proof that I was more than just a bystander. If I signed, I would officially be part of the cover-up. My chest felt tight. I picked up my phone and dialed a lawyer's number I had saved weeks ago, but before I could hit call, a message from my boss popped up. "We're all counting on you." My stomach turned. I felt like I was on a sinking ship, but everyone was pretending the water wasn't rising. And maybe I was the biggest coward of them all. I put down my phone, took a deep breath, and signed the damn papers. It was the worst decision I had ever made, but at that moment, I couldn't see another way out. The next few days were unbearable. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting the police to show up at my door. Every email, every phone call sent my heart into overdrive. I saw coworkers disappear overnight, some fired, others resigning before the storm hit. I wanted to believe I still had a chance to escape, but the truth was, I was already drowning. And then, the nightmare became real. The scandal broke wide open. News reporters lined the street outside our office. The CEO had gone into hiding. But I couldn't hide. I was still inside that building, pretending to work while the walls crumbled around me. I watched as higher-ups deleted files, shredded documents, whispering among themselves. The panic was contagious, and I felt it clawing at my own sanity. The company officially collapsed a week later. Everyone was either under investigation or trying to flee. I had stopped going to work, waiting for the inevitable knock on my door. And then it happened. A subpoena. My stomach dropped when I saw my name on it. They were coming for all of us. I could barely breathe as I read through the legal documents. The reality hit me like a truck. I had signed those papers, I had played along, and now I would have to answer for it. The idea of prison sent me into a spiral of panic. I thought about running, but where would I go? There was no escape from this. The trial was humiliating. My name was dragged through the mud. The prosecution painted me as a willing participant, and the worst part, they weren't wrong. I had made my choices, but I wasn't the mastermind. I was just a scared employee who didn't know how to say no. That didn't matter, though. I was guilty in the eyes of the world. In the end, I got a plea deal. No prison, but my career was over. No one would ever trust me again. The worst part wasn't the punishment. It was the fact that I had betrayed myself. I had let fear turn me into someone I didn't recognize. And now, I had to live with that for the rest of my life.